Hello, and welcome to the Stone Room for today's episode. Today, we'll be bringing you highlights from our recertification celebration, which happened here at the library on November 15th, and we'll also bring you an interview with library archivist Lynda Ames, and we'll close the program with an all-historical book talk. I'm here with Jonna Fredrickson, who is the chair of the Wareham Free Library Board of Trustees. Welcome, Jonna.
Thank you.
How long have you been involved with being with the Board of Trustees?
Board of Trustees, I started in 2009, was on for about 2 years, and then went off for a couple of years, and then this is my 6th year, so a while.
So you've been right through the process of when the Wareham Library has been decertified.
Right, yeah, I would come back on the board, and then in 2014 it was decertified due to funding cuts, and so it's been about 4 years, and now we're recertified. So yeah.
Tell me about how important recertification is for this library.
It's really important for a couple of reasons. One, recertification means that we get state aid, so we get direct grant money, which is nice, and I think this year it's going to be about $16,000.
That's awesome.
Which is great because that will fund some very, very necessary programs.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is that it goes from this library being just this island where you have a given number of resources and that's it, to this being the equivalent of the entry hall to a much larger library, which is the combined resources of everybody in the system. So
that's right.
We go from being very, very small to being very, very large. So
that's right.
Really, really
with you're saying that with Wareham, the library, its resources are 166,000.
Yeah.
Sales, it goes to 3.2 million,
right.
And then you extend it out to the Commonwealth, the whole Commonwealth system, that 8-9 library system, and it's now 26 million.
Yeah, it's a huge difference, and it's a way to get an interaction with a much larger world, both physical books and then also obviously what goes online and things like that. And for the people here, the great resource here is that you can come here, people can help you find what you need to do, especially for students. So you come here, you're looking for specific resources, you get them, and so you can get them from all different resources. But just as important, I think, is that when you come here, and let's say you're a middle school student, you have a topic, and you put in Mahatma Gandhi or something like that, and 5 million things come up on Google, and you don't know how to really figure out what is a good source, what is not. You can come here, go to reference and see you and say, okay, how do we do this? So it's a way for people from being very, very young, from preschool, to learn the basics of the language all the way through to graduate school and beyond into lifelong learning, where you have access to a body of knowledge and the ability and the help to navigate it.
And it's not just for students,
No.
that secondary, post-secondary education. It's also for middle-aged people, and people, older people. I see a ton of older people, and I see immigrants too.
Oh yeah, so we do have.
It's just all those segments of the population that you wouldn't think about.
Oh yeah, and because we also have reading partners, we have GED, prep, we have English as a second language, all kinds of different things. So it's lifelong. So you can come here just to be entertained. You can come here to meet with different people, and just to sort of keep your brain active. And we know how important that is.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at brain health, being able to do puzzles, being able to read new things, and interact with other people, really keeps us healthier and much more flexible and sort of aware of our surroundings.
That's right. And recertification isn't just about the materials. It's about museum passes.
Yeah.
It's about just being able to take advantage of some of the same things that all these other communities.
Absolutely, because just the museum passes alone for people with small children, you get to go to Buttonwood Park or something like that. But also, if whatever age you are, you can go to the Museum of Fine Arts, and you can go to all these things that you might not do because it's cost prohibitive, but it gives you a chance to explore some different things, which is great.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
That Museum of Fine Arts pass, I take advantage of that for myself.
Yeah.
$10 for adult admission, you can't beat it.
Oh man, you can't beat it. So it's a great resource, and it's just a wonderful thing to be able to have that in an affordable way, because those things are cost prohibitive sometimes.
Extremely expensive.
It is, right? If you go to the Museum of Science, you're looking at $45 a person. So you have a family of 4, you're looking at well over $100. So with the help of a pass, it brings it down to something that's a little bit more affordable.
The other thing about recertification is we were able to do it a year early, and explain to me how who was involved in that process?
Sure. Basically what happens with certification is you have to be open a given number of hours. You have to be adequately staffed. And the town has to give a certain amount of money toward the library to make sure that it remains a public library and that it's stable. So all of those things were things we've been working on over the last 3 years, and through the town actually upping the amount of the library budget much more than we expected. We were able to do that a year in advance, and that was due to the work of Derek Sullivan, who's our town administrator, and also Marco Carlozzi, who was our former director, who really sort of got the process going and made sure everything else was lined up. And so, so it was good, and and we've gone from there. So and the selectmen, I know, we're happy to hear that it's back as well. So it's a good thing. Yeah,
the library is such a great resource to this community.
It is.
It's really great to see the town stepping up and doing it.
Yeah, and the staff is marvelous. So this is the best public library. When I moved here 16 years ago, I had never seen a public library this way, and it's still just a fabulous, fabulous place. And I look forward to it being able to offer even more to the town.
Awesome.
Sort of move forward. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I'm here with Kathy Murphy, our acting director, and she also is our head cataloger. Welcome, Kathy.
Hello.
Tell me a little bit about how important recertification is.
Well, it really opens the world up to the people of Wareham. We can get almost anything now, where before we were confined to just our collection.
So we have a celebration here, this incredible party. Tell me about the energy, the amount of people that are coming out in the community to really just celebrate this incredible accomplishment.
This is great. This is the most celebration we've had in a good 10 years. People are thrilled to have access again, and it's really fantastic to have this much support.
I'm here with Megan Neely, who is a member of the Wareham community. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me about how your impression, your thoughts on the library being recertified and how important this is to the community.
I mean, it's just awesome being here tonight. Obviously, everybody's very excited and happy that they can finally start accessing resources in other towns and all over the state again. It's clearly been something that the town has really needed, and it just feels good to see how happy everyone is. I'm very happy to be a library card holder tonight.
Tell me about your own impressions about your own ability to access all these incredible resources now that we're recertified again.
Well, I mean, for me personally, some of you might know me as a reporter with the Wareham Week newspaper, and I do come to the library when I need information. Steve has helped me on articles before, so it's great to know that well of information that I can access has only gotten deeper. It's extremely important in today's world to make sure that we can fact check and have the right information.
And tell me about this celebration, this really great atmosphere of people from the community coming together to celebrate this great thing.
Yeah, it's just this fantastic gathering of people who are all kind of sharing their personal stories of what the library means to them and how happy they are to see it move forward in the future. Talking about what is Wareham Library going to look like moving forward, what are other things that we can start bringing in for people, and for parents who homeschool or students who are doing projects, things just got so much better for them, and they're all just so excited to have this available.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, and now we're actually in the Stone Room for an actual interview. And we're here with Library Archivist Lynda Ames. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about how you got started with genealogy and history and research in the town of Wareham. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I came back from California. I lived out there for 10 years, and I came back here and spent a lot of time in this room doing genealogy, which I had started while I took classes on it in California. And I thought, well, I'm here all the time, and they had a little page job available, so I took that. And the next thing you know, they realized that I was the only person in the building that knew anything about genealogy and Wareham history, which I have learned through my great-grandparents and my grandparents. And so I kind of got the job by default. So here I am. And that was in 1997.
But you've been involved with Wareham history for almost 40 years now, is that?
Yep, I've been doing genealogy and the history for 40 years, yep.
Incredible. That's longer than I've been alive.
And I haven't learned enough yet. There's still more.
That's amazing. So tell me about some of the great resources that we have in this room that people can access.
when I think about this room, all I can think of is Carter looking at King Tut's tomb for the wonderful things. We've got some wonderful old documents and books and ledgers and whatnot.
Some of which are right behind us.
Absolutely. I can tell you that these we've been working on are ledger books that theoretically belong to the town hall, but they're over here for safekeeping. Our public has, access to them, but unfortunately there is nothing that's indexed.
Right.
So if you are looking for something, if you wanted to do some research on the almshouse, we'd have to find the almshouse record books, and you'd have to just go through it page by page. There's no dates. There's no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as important to people, I guess, back then.
Yeah.
So we have that. We also have a beautiful old ledger book that Sylvanus Bourne's documents and papers.
Yep.
He was Wareham's foremost in his day, cartographer, surveyor, and historian, town historian. And a lot of his findings are written in his books, and some things are no longer available anywhere else.
Yep.
In that same journal is the Faring Papers, and those they were a journal that was copied by James Minor Lincoln, and we've dubbed him the Wareham's mimeograph machine.
Yeah.
Long before there was such a thing.
Right.
The man would copy anything.
Handwritten.
And he would find old documents and old ledgers all over town and just borrow them and copy them.
Yep.
And we're very lucky to have them because a lot of the things, the originals have been lost or misplaced, or perhaps they're in the family and we don't know where they are.
Stuff going back to the 1700s all the way through the present, through that.
They were written in the early to mid 1800s,
Yep.
but the information, of course, Sylvanus Bourne did a lot of early genealogy from the 1700s right straight through. Yep.
A lot of it was some epitaphs.
Yes, he did some. He copied the grave inscriptions, and now the stones are gone,
Yep.
or they're
Yep.
illegible.
Yep.
And they just, some things are just gone. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have the information. It'd just be gone.
And birth abstracts too, right?
Yes, birth, marriages, and deaths up to the point where, he passed away.
Yep.
Yeah, but Mr. Lincoln took the town records from the beginning of Wareham, 1739, and copied all of the births, marriages, and deaths. And we have those in 3 big volumes, and they're indexed, thank heaven. So that's very helpful.
What else do we have?
Well, we've got, we have the original town records, and those were copied also by Mr. Lincoln,
Yep.
and those start in 1739. Those record all of the town meetings, whoever happened to be elected, told you who was in charge of the herring
Yep.
for the year, and who was in charge of fence viewer and deer reeve, and all of the people that had all of these crazy little jobs for the town.
Yep.
So those are all documented, but unfortunately, no index, not dated properly.
Yep.
And you've got to be very, very patient and sit there and go through them all.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. We have directories, street listings,
Yep.
town reports,
Yep.
and I think probably one of the most sought after is our photograph and postcard collection. Yeah, very, very much so. And we're still in the process of putting them in order. They need to be filed,
Yep.
but the photographs are wonderful.
Amazing photographs. And we're not talking about just Wareham, we're talking about Onset.
Yes, oh yes, well, that is, Onset is Wareham.
Although some people think different.
Well, this is exactly true, but it is everything. We have a lot of souvenir pictures and things as well. Yep.
So if somebody's interested in doing some research. They want to look at some maps. What do we have as far as maps go?
Well, again, Sylvanus Bourne, as I said, was a cartographer, and he did the main map, which is 1832. I believe several of surrounding towns have one of his maps as well. At the time, he mapped out all of Wareham, and the things that were the most interesting or important to people were where the church was, where the schools were, where the stagecoach stops were, where the mills were, and where all of the important or large salt marshes were because of the salt haying and gathering salt, drying.
Bog iron.
Exactly. So those things are important. The next map that Wareham created, professional map, that we have is 1857. We have 1879 and 1903. And progressively over the years, the names of the residents were put on the maps, which is vital, I mean, to genealogists wanting to know where their great-grandparents lived, or trying to track a house. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's 1903, indicates the shapes of the houses. So, for instance, if you looked at the map and you went up High Street, you would see all of the houses, and so-and-so lives here, and maybe Crocker lives here, and Bumpus lives here, and it would show the name of the person who owned the property, and it would show you a little indication of the size or the shape of their house. And if they had a barn, there'd be a barn. And then if they had a garage, it's just a little square with an X through it. And even if they had windmills. So, you know, that's kind of interesting too. Then you can see whether buildings were moved or destroyed, caught fire, you know, were gone, whatever.
And that's, development just happens, you know what I mean? And some of these buildings, the original placement, they just lost. So these are treasures.
Yep, they absolutely are. And we've made sure that Wareham, the library has everything of maps that the Massachusetts Archives has, and the Registry of Deeds. So we also have Sanborn insurance maps. Those, of course, were done by the insurance companies to indicate the buildings that they insured. You won't find all of the outskirts of Wareham. It's just the buildings, the mills, and that sort of thing. We have copies. We do not have the colored originals, but the colored originals indicate by color. For instance, and I'm not sure about the colors, but red, if it was done in red, it would be a brick building. If it was yellow, it would be wooden. It gives all of the scales. It tells you whether they had any kind of fire prevention, if they had any kind of night watchman, that sort of thing. So those are very, very handy and very interesting. We also have a lot of the development maps. The developments I mean is to Swift's Beach, Parkwood, Pinehurst, Hamilton Beach, Briarwood Beach. Most of those were all developed in the 1920s when people started coming down here and wanting summer homes, as opposed to just going to Onset and staying in the hotels and owning cottages. Everybody else was jealous, so they wanted to make Wareham another Onset. But so we do have a lot of those development maps.
Outstanding. One of the most, I've been here a short time, but I'll tell you, one of the most common questions I get is, how can I find out more information about my house?
The most frustrating question we could possibly get. Everyone thinks that their house is special. Well, of course, don't we? And there's not history. Just because Wareham's 300 years old doesn't mean that every house and every piece of property is historical. Sometimes I just tell them, if you go back far enough, you'll probably find that there's more history in the land that your house is on than the house itself. But if they're looking for, if they live in an older house, in 2005, the Wareham Historical Commission had done a inventory of all the historic properties, and we have the books on that and the map, so they can come and look them up. Some houses we have a vertical file on. Let's say if an old house was moved or added to or caught fire or something like that, and there was a newspaper article or photographs, we made a vertical file. But other than that, the best thing that you can do really is to go to the assessor's office, look at the old assessor's card, the tax card, look at the old owners, get your information, your map and page, and go to the registry of deeds and just track them back.
Yep.
And generally, I could go on. It's a very tedious
It really
project.
is. I've helped several people do it.
And, I hate to tell people, I'm sorry, we're just not staffed to do that sort of thing. But I tell them, go do this, and then come back and tell me what you found, and then I'll tell you what to do next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I walk over to the side and I just see these incredible records that we have for genealogy and people looking to do that kind of research.
Right.
We have a lot of that stuff. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, genealogy has changed drastically since I started here.
Absolutely.
Computerized genealogy was just getting started.
Right.
We didn't have Ancestry or Family Search, which is the Mormon site. We didn't have any of that. Everything had to be done through books, going to town halls, other repositories, the National Archives, the state archives,
Yep.
looking at census records. Everything had to be done by hand.
Right.
Now we still have all of our resources are still here in the room. If you really want to do it by hand, the old-fashioned way, and not do it through Ancestry, which of course is a little pricey. It's I think about $300 a year for a home subscription. But it can be done. So we do have all the resources: the birth, marriage, and death records, tax records, street indicators. We have a lot of the census on microfilm that you would find on Ancestry.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Speaking of microfilm, tell me a little bit about what we have on microfilm.
Oh, well, let me see what we have. Let me see if I can remember. We have, first of all, the largest collection is the Wareham Courier.
Yes, that's right.
And the Wareham Courier goes from, I'm sorry?
But we don't have everything with the Wareham Courier.
No. We have 1905 to 1919. And then it picks up again in 1930.
Yes.
And to the current month.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the hurricane of '38, the couriers were still being stored in their office on Main Street, and which is near Cumberland Farms. And unfortunately, it was flooded, and they washed right down the bay. That was the end of them. They hadn't gotten around to doing those.
Yeah.
So we lost a whole 10 years.
It's crazy.
So we don't have those. One of the things, and for genealogists and anybody who's interested in family history, we had, well, it was my mom actually. My dad passed away. My mom was looking for something to do, and I brought her in here and I put her in front of the microfilm, and that woman read every courier from 1905 all the way to 2004 when she stopped, and gleaned every obituary and every death notice out of the paper. And we finally got it on a database.
Yep.
And we have it in an index.
Yes.
So if their obituary is in that courier, you don't need to know the date, you don't need to sit there going over and over the reels. You just look it up in the index and there you go.
Because you've got the page, you've got the page, the column number, the issue, the date.
Issue, yep, and in some cases the age. The only thing that, and I wish that we had thought of it in the beginning, probably the first 10 years, it will say NL for not listed because the paper had no page numbers.
Yes.
Had we just thought, and of course there weren't that many pages either, if we just thought of it at the beginning, we could have put, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, and done it. So now when someone, is especially an email request, we have to sit there, and we offered it. We've got to come up with it. So we have to sit there and go on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is there. So other than that, we have a few reels of the old Bourne couriers.
Yeah.
We have some of the ancient records. They're very difficult to read. The Sylvanus Bourne book that I mentioned is on there, but you can barely read it, and the problem is it's oversized, so you can't print out a whole full page.
Right, you kind of have to maneuver it.
Yeah. We have Civil War soldiers and soldiers and sailors records, Civil War soldiers and widows benefit census. We have that, and we have quite a few of the federal census too.
Yep. So, one of the things about this room, though, is it's close to the public to some degree. You kind of have to make an appointment with one of us to
Right.
access the resources.
Well, it's a little difficult to find anything, and unfortunately, back in 2008, the room got closed abruptly, and things kind of were as they stood, and we were extremely busy at the time.
Right.
But especially in the summertime, we had a lot of genealogists that would come to Wareham for their vacations, and they'd send Dad off with the kiddies to the beach, and Mom would come in and do the genealogy. That was her idea of a good time.
Right.
But we were very, very busy, and really one person just wasn't enough in the room to keep up with the requests and take care of
still isn't.
filing. And things keep coming in, and you don't want to turn anything away.
not, no.
And we have some absolute treasures, old signs and little bits and pieces, that aren't paper, but you can't turn it down.
No, of course not. I'm not saying that it's closed and we're turning people away. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that if you really want to make an appointment with one of us to do this kind of research, this genealogy research, or to access the resources, we have a form on the website that you can fill out.
Right.
If you go to the homepage, you go to adults and history and genealogy, you can fill out a form,
Right.
which will go right to one of us, and
Yeah.
we'll be happy to take care of that request.
Exactly. It may not be quickly, because a lot of the things take a little bit of time to find.
They certainly do.
And once in a while, you have to kind of go outside the box, and it's not in Wareham, but over the years, I've learned a lot of tricks about where things are hidden.
Yes.
And, so I'll do that and come back in. But, we're usually more than helpful with people.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of it is because we love to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, just the number of questions that we field on a regular basis is the stuff that we talk to each other about is just awesome. It's history,
Yeah.
and it's buried in books, but it's also very alive, and it's a very important thing.
My goal before I go is to get this room absolutely perfect, so that when I leave, someone can walk in the door and just put their hand right on whatever they're looking for.
And I'm confident that
It'll get done. It'll get done.
if someone wants to contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, they can get in touch with you.
Yep.
You can call me.
Yes.
I have no problem with people using my home email.
Yep.
And that is HX Saver. HX is the medical short term for history, so I'm History Saver. HXSAVER@gmail.com.
Awesome, and we'll put that on the screen so people can see that. And I just want to say that I've been really looking forward to this interview, just sitting down and talking with you about some of the amazing things that we have in this room. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you. Well, we can hopefully draw people in and get them excited about, what's around them and what surrounds them every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Lynda. Our first book is a new release, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, by Heather Morris. In April of 1942, Leo Sokolov, a Slovakian Jew, is transported to the concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, where his German captors discover that he can speak several different languages. While being incarcerated for the next 2.5 years at Auschwitz, Leo is tasked with permanently marking his fellow prisoners with numbered tattoos. Often risking his own life, Leo uses his fortunate position to exchange money and jewels for food to help out his fellow prisoners. He also meets a young woman named Gita, whom he vows to help survive the camp and one day marry. The novel is a remarkable testimony about the endurance of love and humanity at its darkest hour, and it is currently on the New York Times bestseller list. My next recommendation is Unsheltered by Barbara Kingslover, which helps explore the past and the present and the human capacity for resilience and compassion in times of turmoil. The story navigates the tale of two families, 2 centuries apart, who live in Vineland, New Jersey, on the corner of 6th and Plum, who attempt to navigate the end of the world as they knew it. One such story follows Willa Knox and her husband, mired in debt, while the other narrative traces science teacher Thatcher Greenwood, who risked scandal to teach a newly published work by Charles Darwin. With history as the backdrop for each of these families, the characters depict a remarkable portrait of life in precarious and unpredictable times, to help those in the present help navigate the future. Unsheltered is now in its 4th week on the New York Times bestseller list. If you're new to the world of historical fiction, try The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory. The book is a novel that traces the intrigue surrounding the court of King Henry VIII, his second wife, Anne Boleyn, and the infamous Boleyn family. When Mary Boleyn enters court life at the age of 14, she quickly catches the eye of King Henry VIII. Dazzled by the king, Mary falls in love with Henry and her growing role as an unofficial queen. But Mary soon realizes that she has become a pawn in her family's ambitious plot when the king's interest begins to wane. She is soon forced to step aside for her best friend and sister, her rival, Anne. With Mary's destiny hanging in the balance, she realizes that she must defy her family to put her fate in her own hands. The book has put more than 1 million copies into print, and it was made into a 2008 movie starring Natalie Portman and Scarlett Johansson. It brings to light the story of a woman of extraordinary determination and desire who survived a treacherous political landscape by following her heart. If you're looking for a new series, try the Outlander series. The first book, Outlander, was a runner-up for the best book in the PBS series, The Great American Read, and it also spawned a Starz series, now in its 4th season. If you like World War II stories, try The Steel Wave, a novel of World War II by Jeff Sarah, which focuses on the soldiers of D-Day and the Normandy invasion in 1944, or All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, which won the 2015 Pulitzer Prize. If you're in search of an interesting read, take a look at The Girl with the Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, which focuses on a 16-year-old model of Vermeer, whose relationship becomes intimate and complex with the Dutch painter. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Checking Out the Wareham Library. Come visit the library and stop by to see some of the friendly faces that we have here every day.